Welcome back to the deep dive. For decades now, there has been this one really dominant story.
This huge narrative, yeah.
Exactly. The idea that science and religion are just, locked in this mortal combat, a zero-sum game.
An intellectual cage match, basically.
Yeah.
You've got the big names, Coyne, Harris, Hitchens, Dawkins, all painting that picture. One side has to win.
But it feels, I don't know, incomplete.
It's fundamentally incomplete. So today, we're taking the opposite road. Our whole mission here is to get into the minds of the accommodationists.
Okay, accommodationists.
Yeah, these are all the authors, philosophers, and scientists who argue that not only are science and religion compatible, but that they need each other for a complete human experience.
So we're moving past the fight and looking for the harmony. Not enemies, but collaborators.
That's a good way to put it.
I really like the analogy one of our sources used, that they're two sides of the same coin. Science, in this view, is the brains of the operation.
Right. It's methodical, it's evidence-based, it figures out how things tick.
And religion. Religion is the heart.
Unquestionably. Gets into those big, non-quantifiable questions,
Yeah.
meaning, morality, purpose. When they team up, you get a much richer, more multifaceted view of reality.
Science can tell you how the universe is expanding.
But religion helps you wrestle with why you should even care that it exists in the first place.
So let's start with the accommodationists' big challenge to that conflict narrative. They say it's just not fair to blame religion for all of society's drama.
Right, all the wars, the oppression.
Exactly. Believers are quick to point out that science and, secular politics have also caused just monumental conflicts and issues throughout history.
Yeah.
The capacity for drama isn't just a religious thing.
That's the starting point. It's the key to finding common ground. Once you accept that both systems can be, weaponized by people, you can start to see where they actually connect in a good way.
And that brings us to Michael Gillen's book, Amazing Truths.
How Science and Bible Agree, yeah. He doesn't just look for some minor overlap. He actually argues that faith itself is the Midas touch that elevates both science and Christianity.
How does he make that connection? I mean, to a lot of people, the Bible seems so ancient and science is, modern.
He draws these really direct parallels. He points out similarities between religious ideas of, say, instantaneous communication like prayer with modern physics concepts, the fluid nature of space and time, or things that seem to communicate instantly over huge distances.
Quantum entanglement.
Exactly. Yeah. He suggests that the very openness to something beyond what we can immediately see is what drives both deep faith and groundbreaking science.
And this is where interpretation becomes so important. You have Steve Jones in The Serpent's Promise, who says a lot of the conflict comes from taking religious texts way too literally.
Absolutely.
He argues you should read stories like Genesis, Exodus, Adam and Eve, not as historical records, but as powerful symbols, myths with deep real-life parallels about being human.
And that shift from literal to metaphorical truth, it's just so powerful. And Jones makes a crucial point about why we still need religion, even with all our science.
What's that?
He has this great quote. He says, "Illness, depression, and greed are still with us, and mathematical biology will not cure them."
Wow. Yeah, science can solve an equation, but it can't solve existential angst.
Precisely.
And that critique of science's limits, that takes us right to Alistair McGrath. He really goes head-to-head with the proponents of what's often called new atheism.
Right. For you listening, if you're not steeped in this debate, new atheism is that really hard-line, aggressive stance from people like Dawkins and Harris. The view that religion is just plain dangerous and irrational.
And McGrath pushes back hard.
He does. In his book, The Big Question, he attacks their main assumption, that reality is just one single cold fact that only science can understand. He says reality is way more complex. It's like a detailed map, a gripping story, a beautiful picture.
So they're all different but valid ways of seeing the same thing. The scientific framework is one map, not the whole territory.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is his critique of science itself. I mean, unlike the fixed rules of pure math, science is always evolving, changing its own theories. McGrath says faith provides that stability, meaning, purpose, a moral compass in the very places where science, by its own rules, has to be silent.
We also can't forget the history here, the idea of natural theology.
Oh, that's a huge one.
This overlooked fact that the guys who basically created modern science, we're talking Kepler, Newton, Copernicus, they saw the laws of nature they were uncovering not as proof against God, but as...
As manifestations of God's handiwork.
Exactly. It completely destabilizes the idea of an eternal conflict when you realize the pioneers of the scientific revolution were often driven by faith.
They were accommodating science and faith by design from the very beginning.
That historical route leads us right into the modern philosophical battlefield, where this whole thing gets taken to another level, especially in physics and consciousness.
Oh, yeah. I mean, think back to the 70s and Fritjof Capra's book, The Tao of Physics. He was one of the first to really dig into the parallels between modern physics, quantum theory, relativity, and Eastern mysticism.
He saw the same interconnectedness in both.
He did. And then you have someone like Krista Tippett in books like Einstein's God, who just expands that journey. She's interviewing these giants physicists like Freeman Dyson, religious thinkers like Thich Nhat Hanh, and drawing these deep connections between them.
Let's get into some of those cosmic analogies they use. What about dark matter?
Okay, dark matter. It's this massive, ultimate cosmic force. We know it's there. We can see its gravitational pull on everything.
But you can't see it, can't touch it.
Right. It's the ultimate unseen reality with an undeniable impact. It's often used as an analogy for God operating in a stealthy way, leaving clues in nature's wonders but staying hidden.
Its influence is everywhere, but its nature is elusive. I see the parallel.
Then you get into the really mind-bending stuff like quantum mechanics.
Right, the whole is light a particle or a wave question.
And Paul Dirac comes along and says, thanks to quantum mechanics, it's actually both. But the real head-turner is the role of the observer. Those particles only really reveal themselves when they're detected, when they're watched.
It's like reality needs us to be looking at it for it to fully exist.
Exactly. Which raises a massive philosophical question. What is the role of consciousness in all of this?
It's a powerful pivot. You go from measuring objects to trying to measure awareness itself.
And that's what Peter Russell talks about in his book, From Science to God. He went from being an atheist physicist to a spiritualist after diving into Eastern religions.
What was his big takeaway?
He concluded that consciousness isn't just some biological byproduct. It's the ultimate mystery, maybe even the ultimate reality.
And Deepak Chopra takes that idea even further.
He does. He argues that God isn't some distant bearded man in the sky. God is, and this is his phrase, human awareness itself, or a higher universal consciousness.
So he's aligning reality with the principles of quantum mechanics. If awareness shapes reality, then maybe the highest form of awareness is the divine.
It takes the whole debate out of ancient texts and puts it right in the laboratory of the mind.
What's so fascinating is that this accommodationist argument isn't just philosophical. There are measurable empirical benefits to being religious.
Absolutely. We have to talk about the science that has completely obliterated that old idea of the mind and body being separate. The field of, and it's a mouthful, psychoneuroimmunology.
Okay, break that down for us.
It's basically the study of how everything about our lives, our thoughts, our emotions, our social connections directly impacts our physical health, our immune system, our nervous system.
It's the scientific proof for mind over matter.
It is. Your thoughts and your spiritual state literally change your body's chemistry. And this leads right to the massive body of research from Harold G. Koenig.
Right. In his work, Medicine, Religion, and Health, he ran countless rigorous clinical experiments.
And his findings are just robust.
Okay.
He showed that religious involvement can significantly improve mental health, boost the immune and endocrine systems, help with stress, and this is a big one, lower mortality rates.
He even cited specific conditions, right?
Yeah, improved outcomes for patients with breast cancer, with HIV/AIDS, when spiritual care was part of their treatment. This isn't just about a feeling of comfort. These are verifiable physiological benefits.
So what's the mechanism? How does it work?
He lays it out pretty clearly. Positive social interactions, strong communities, and positive psychological states. Hope, optimism, joy. They're shown to boost immune function. At the same time, pro-social behavior, like volunteering and altruism, improves both mental and physical health.
I remember seeing one of his stats that was just staggering.
The 80% one.
Yes. 80% of over 100 studies he reviewed showed religious people reported higher levels of well-being. That's a huge majority of the data pointing in one direction.
And it has practical implications. Koenig suggests health professionals should be asking patients about their spiritual needs as a standard part of care. And that's happening. Spiritual care is catching on in major U.S. hospitals.
And it's not just in a clinical setting. Research from all over the world, the US, Asia, Europe, it all shows that higher religiosity is linked with a lower risk of depression, drug abuse, and suicide.
And higher life satisfaction in general. If something demonstrably improves health and happiness, it makes the conflict position, well, a lot harder to defend.
Which means we have to address the other side's biggest claim, that religion is the root of all evil.
Right. And for that, we turn to Keith Ward's book, Is Religion Dangerous? He offers a direct rebuttal.
He calls that assertion absurd. So what's his argument? That violence would still exist without faith.
That's the core of it. He argues that religious institutions, they just share in the general moral state of the societies in which they exist.
So they're a mirror of humanity, not the source of its flaws.
Exactly. He points to the horrific mass murders committed under purely secular political ideologies in the 20th century. Communism, fascism. Those regimes proved humanity doesn't need God to justify genocide.
So belief systems, whether they're religious or political, are just tools. The real issue is the human hand holding the tool.
Precisely. Ward argues that politics has driven mass murder in places like Russia and China, and science. Well, science created the weapons of mass destruction. He stresses that the biggest conflicts, like the two world wars or the expansion of slavery, were driven by politics and economics, not primarily by religion.
And he brings it closer to home, too.
He does. He cites major U.S. domestic terrorist attacks that had nothing to do with religion, like the Boston Marathon bombing or the Oklahoma City bombing. The impulse for violence is human, not just theological.
This also lets us tackle that old claim that religious people are somehow delusional just because their beliefs can't be scientifically proven.
And for that, we have to look at the official guide on mental health, the DSM from the American Psychiatric Association.
What does it say?
It states very clearly that religious beliefs are not considered delusions. And the reason is critical. It's because they are shared and accepted within a cultural context.
It's a shared belief system, a cultural phenomenon, not a sign of a neurological problem.
Right. Now, it's important to say that while religion offers these health benefits, it can't replace medical treatment for something like schizophrenia, which is a physical brain issue. But the belief itself is not a pathology.
And this is where the public data gets really surprising. There are surveys in the book, Religion versus Science, what religious people really think.
And they completely undermine the stereotypes.
They do. They show religious individuals, Jews, Muslims, Christians, actually have similar or often higher interests in science than non-religious people.
And it gets even more interesting when you look at hot-button issues like climate change.
Right, because the narrative is that faith equals denial.
But the data says no. A huge 72% of creationists believe climate change is real and human-caused. The research suggests political conservatism is a much bigger driver of climate denial than any specific religious belief.
So the conflict is often political, not theological.
It seems the differences that fuel conflict are inherently human. Politics, social loyalties, not divine commands.
You can see that across different world religions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, they all contribute value and offer different models of the universe. One of the sources mentions the Ojibwe tribe's cosmology, which is very different from modern physics, but provides immense cultural meaning.
And those differences, like reincarnation versus resurrection, they shouldn't lead to conflict.
They shouldn't. The conflicts are stirred up by what one source calls nettlesome human nature factors: politics, economics, ego, ignorance, greed.
So the accommodationist view ends by saying that faith, no matter its form, the Bible, the Quran, a spiritual path, should be a framework for respect, justice, and happiness.
And never an excuse to harm or kill.
So after all that, what's the big takeaway for you, the listener, trying to put all this together?
I think it means that the Battle Royale story is just, well, it's intellectually lazy. It's demonstrably false when you look at all the evidence.
The accommodationist position is the stronger one.
It is. It's championed by scholars like McGrath, backed by clinical data from Koenig. And it says both science and religion have had good and bad impacts. The best path forward is a cordial coexistence, mutual respect and compromise.
Okay, so we've spent this whole deep dive looking at the evidence, the measurable benefits. But let's end with the philosophical question for you to think about. It builds on this idea of logic versus faith. We're talking about Blaise Pascal's famous wager.
Pascal's wager. From centuries ago. It basically frames belief in God not as an act of pure faith, but as a rational bet, a risk management decision.
Exactly. Pascal argued that if you choose to believe in God and you turn out to be wrong, well, no harm is done.
You've lived a good moral life, and as Koenig's research shows, probably a healthier and happier one.
But if you choose to believe, and you're right, then you're in good standing and, well, you head to heaven. So the final question for you to reflect on is this. When you weigh all the measurable evidence, the improved well-being, the social support, the meaning against the ultimate risk of being wrong, does Pascal's wager actually offer the most logical path for your own life?
A profound challenge. It uses logic to justify faith.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.